Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm enjoying this time of year. Man, high summer.
Oh, boy.
The flowers are blooming, the pots and planters are growing, the vegetables are producing.
We're at the end of July. There's been plenty of sun. There's been plenty of rain. We've
lucked out in the rain. Yeah. I know, it kind of depends what rain cloud you were under.
Right.
But in South Fargo, our lawn yard looks really, really nice. So I hope everyone that's listening has been under a generous rain cloud as well. Not too much, not too little.
Well, and I know that the last week we talked about this, but the last week you had people over as part of the garden tour. They got to see your great green lawn. And I thought this week we could talk about also part of the thing that was on tour that I didn't get to was your garden.
Yes.
Your vegetable garden, I should say.
Last week was the Red River Valley Garden Tour, and 817 people attended.
That's got to be a record.
That is a record.
Yeah.
Yep. This was the third year, 300 people first year, 500 the second, and 817 was amazing. And the proceeds go to the nonprofit Garden of Healing in town here. So $12,000 was raised for that wonderful Garden of Healing. And yes, as people toured the yards, there were 8 yards. Ours was one of them. And so it was fun to see what the people shared amongst themselves, ideas and things that they're growing. And it was fun to talk to everyone. And of course, our vegetable garden is kind of to the rear of our lot. And so it was fun for people to see that too. And they could kind of gauge, were their vegetables ahead of ours, behind ours? What are they doing? What are they growing? And so fun to see. And then, of course, the day after that, the American Hemerocallis Society, Region 1. Yes. That is the botanical name for daylily.
Oh, okay.
So those of us laymen know it as the American Daylily Society. The Upper Midwest region was meeting in Fargo, and so they toured our place on Saturday. And they toured the NDSU Daylily Garden. Mm-hmm. Now, NDSU has the largest daylily collection in the United States.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Quite impressive. And they toured the Northern Plains Botanic Garden Society. And then they toured our yard, which is an example of how you can use daylilies in landscaping, other perennial gardens, and so how you incorporate the daylilies into a home yard. So last week was a very good week for tours.
Yeah. Well, speaking of tour, you've got a guest here today.
Yes. Interning in our NDSU Extension Cass County office is Casey Humphreys. Casey's been with us since May. And so NDSU has extension intern positions open each year. And so, Casey, tell us a little bit about yourself. Now, I know you're not interning in horticulture, family and community wellness, but the intern positions give you a chance to kind of experience all that goes in our office. Horticulture, family, community wellness, agriculture. And so Casey, where are you from originally?
Yeah, I grew up in southeast Nebraska. I went to college in Idaho, and we ended up here after my husband got a fellowship at NDSU as well. And now he's going to start grad school there. And we've been here for about a year, and it's been awesome interning at the extension office for exactly the reason you talked about, is being able to bounce around and see all the different fields and positions and areas to go after. And it's been great.
I'll put you on the spot. Are there a couple of things in extension that you maybe didn't realize before that now you do?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot that I've learned, especially under 4-H. Even though I grew up, knowing 4-H was an organization, I wasn't a part of it. And being able to see the behind the scenes and seeing all that it's a part of has been fantastic. Getting to work with, again, the agriculture natural resource side of things, because I don't have a massive background in that, has been an eye-opening experience as well.
And of course, extension, the interns get a good concept then of what extension is. And extension is kind of the public outreach wing of our land-grant universities. We take the research and the well-founded science-based information and we get it out to the public, just as we're doing in our horticulture podcasts.
Excellent. Well, speaking of getting stuff out to the public, sometimes the public writes in and has questions for you. Don, do you have a question this week to read?
I do. Albert and Kelly wrote in. They actually are listening from Wyoming.
Okay.
And so, yes, thanks, Albert and Kelly, for writing in. They indicate, Don, my son purchased this house. They sent a photo of the house and a tree. My son purchased this house a couple of weeks ago. We are considering pruning this tree by removing 30 to 50% of it. Is it okay to prune this tree by 30 to 50%? What kind of tree is it? And what time of year is best to prune? The house was built in the 1960s and the tree is too large. Thanks, and we enjoy your podcast.
Now, you've got a picture of it, but I couldn't tell what kind of a tree it is.
Yes. Okay. So they sent a picture of the tree, which was awesome. They sent a picture standing back, which showed the entire tree. And for the single-story house, this tree is too large in the front. It's kind of blocking the view of the house.
It almost covers the whole house.
And then they also sent a close-up of the tree, the leaves. And of course, right away, I saw the little burgundy-colored berry type things. So a flowering crabapple.
Okay.
Yep. So by the leaves, the fruit that it's forming, a flowering crabapple. And so yes, you can prune those back quite severely. 30 to 50%. I would easily do that. But the time to do that would be early spring before they leaf out. One reason for not pruning severely this time of year is pruning stimulates a flush of new growth. And that new growth forming now in late July would not have time to toughen up for winter, and it might freeze back. So just hang with the tree until next maybe early April and prune it at that time. So thanks again, Albert and Kelly.
Would pruning also now leave it more exposed for winter and leave those those relatively fresh cuts kind of like make the tree a little bit more vulnerable? Would that be a downturn
You've
too?
got it, John. Absolutely. Because trees this time of year are starting to slow down. They sense that the day length is getting shorter, and that shorter day length starts triggering the trees to know that winter is going to be approaching. So they start slowing down their growth, start toughening up to get ready for the approaching winter. And so the cut surfaces do not heal and seal themselves over the way that they do in spring. In spring, when the day length is starting to increase, the tree knows it's the spring and summer's coming, and so there's more growth, which will seal those over. So open cuts like that done the last half of summer, there's more chance of winter injury.
So it's like leaving an open wound.
You got it. Yep, exactly.
All right. Well, let's get back to talk about your garden, and especially your vegetable garden. I didn't get a chance. There's so many other things to look at in your yard. I didn't get a chance to go back there and look at your vegetable garden. But what were some of the things that you heard from visitors?
Well, I've always enjoyed vegetable gardens since I was a little boy, and so it's always intrigued me. And so a couple of things that visitors to our garden noticed. One of the first things that they noticed is on the wire fence that we have surrounding the garden, they noticed the sweet peas. And of course, sometimes when a person thinks sweet peas, you think of the edible ones.
Yeah.
The ones that you shell and eat, and they're nice and sweet. But sweet peas are an old-fashioned flower. My mom and grandma always had them around the garden fence. And so it had been a few years since we grew sweet peas. And so we planted them at the base of the fence, blooming beautifully. If you've never experienced the fragrance of sweet peas, plant some. Now, they do need a fence or a trellis to climb up, and you can buy sweet pea seed off the seed rack or from seed catalogs. Now, I always look for seed types on sweet peas that say heavy fragrance. I want that fragrance. So you can pick a bouquet, bring them in, and you have that wonderful perfume. A couple of tricks. Some people ask me, how do you get those sweet peas to grow? They've tried them and without success. I love the wisdom of old gardeners. So my mom taught me how to grow sweet peas. So you plant them in April. They like and need cool, chilly soil, so plant them early, April. Soak the seed overnight. It's a very hard seed, about the size of a small pea. Soak them overnight. Plant them in a trench. Dig the trench about 3 inches deep. Plant the seed in the bottom of that. Cover it with only 1 inch of soil. And as those sweet peas grow and elongate. Then you gradually fill in that trench. It gets the root system down deeper where there's more moisture and cool soil. And then also, as they're growing, mulch the soil surface so it stays cool and moist, and then you get beautiful sweet peas. So that was one thing that the people noticed they got.
How high and wide do sweet peas spread? Do they climb?
They will climb. Currently, the end of July here, ours are about 5 feet, 5.5 feet. Once they reach the top of the fence, our fence is about 6 feet, they just kind of tend to hang there. So, I mean, even if your fence isn't that high, they'll still do well. And then once people kind of saw beyond that sweet peas on the fence, one thing that they noticed was broccoli.
Oh, yeah.
The broccoli, we planted our broccoli not overly early, so it was just coming now into nice head. And a number of people asked, how do you get such big heads on the broccoli? And it's all about cultivar. So when I ordered the seed, and we did start our seed ourselves in the basement under lights, about March 15th, you start the seeds for the North Dakota, Minnesota area. And so I looked in one of the seed catalogs, Johnny's Seeds, and I looked for broccoli cultivars that just said they have big, beautiful, nice, tight heads and a good producer. And so I went with that. There's a big difference in broccoli types. So it's all about cultivar. They vary in the length of days and the head size on those. Also, the other thing I enjoy looking for when I'm investigating broccoli types is once you cut the main head, some types will produce lots of little heads surrounding that. So I looked for a variety that said it does that. So that was nice to see. People kind of ask about that. Another thing that they mentioned was, and I might have mentioned this last week too in our podcast, but they noticed that I did not have the tomatoes staked up. And I grew up not staking tomatoes, not putting them on a trellis or cage for no particular reason other than we just planted them and let them do their thing and then harvest them.
Now, it should be said, you've got a fair amount of space.
Exactly, because I did space the tomato plants about 6 feet within the rows, 3 feet.
Yep.
And then the rows were 6 feet apart, which allows them to get fairly massive and still be able to walk between. Now, in the past, I've made the mistake of planting the rows too close and not staking, not caging. And it's one big jungle of tomato plants that I have to do a balancing act to step between and harvest the tomatoes. So this year I spaced them closer. But, for no other particular reason than just, I've got a decent amount of space. But for many people, staking or caging is probably the better option for those. Also, squash, people kind of notice the squash that we've got. And it's interesting. A few people asked me, now, do you plant your squash in hills or in a row? Now, it's interesting. If you look at the seed pack on squash, cucumbers, melons, it will oftentimes say that you can plant them in a hill. That term hill can be a little deceptive because you don't actually form a mound of soil. You don't plant the seed up on a hill of soil. A hill is an old gardening term for a grouping. So when you plant your squash in a hill, you plant a grouping of maybe 4 to 6 seeds in that group. So you aren't physically making a little mound because that would kind of dry out really, really quick up there. So some people are asking, did you plant your squash in a hill or in a row? Now, when you plant them in a hill, you plant this grouping of seeds, then you space quite a ways, then plant another hill, space quite a ways, another hill. Okay. An alternative way of doing that is just plant the seeds in a row, maybe about a foot apart or 8 inches apart. So this year I planted them in a row system instead of the hill system. So I planted each squash seed maybe 8 to 12 inches apart. And some research has shown that produces squash well. If you plant 4 to 6 seeds all in one little grouping or a hill, they can kind of outcompete each other. I mean, it always worked well. That's what Mom did. We had plenty of squash. But this year I did the row method. So that is one thing that people kind of noticed also, that they weren't seeing them in the the groupings that sometimes a person would do. And so it was so fun to visit with each of the people and see. I enjoy asking others how their vegetables and everything are doing. So, John, how is your vegetable doing this year?
I would say that over the past 2 weeks, it's really just exploded. It's absolutely just shot up. And the tomatoes have just they're starting to come in. They're not ripened yet, but we've got a couple of sun sugars, and those I would say we've got them planted in a bed that's maybe about a foot off the ground, and I would say those plants are over my head now, and I'm about 5'10". So those plants are 6 feet, and I would imagine that based on last year, growing them last year, they're going to grow probably at least about another foot.
So now, how do you have them staked up? What method do you use?
Continually and growingly. It is an ongoing construction project. We started with tomato cages, realized that wasn't good enough. And I should say too that we've got them set up in the back of our yard, and then we soon realized that we have to build a fence to keep our dogs and the rabbits out of that area. So we put up a little kind of a snow fence around the raised beds. So we don't have like great access to it. But so anyways, so we've got the tomato cages. Then we realized we had to put other stakes around there. So we put in the T-bar kind of stakes and wrapped that around. And then we've had to put in more taller stakes on the exterior of that and wrap those in twine and try to wind the twine through in kind of an X to kind of keep them up. We also tried I think there's called a weave method. Where you have you have your tomatoes planted in a row, and you set up a large stake like a T-bar kind of thing. Those are those metal posts that you can pound into the ground,
right.
Yeah. And on either end, and then you weave back and forth a piece of twine or a piece of something that won't cut into the tomatoes too much, and that as they grow, they will kind of push against that and kind of grow up. Problem is that we are, those T-bars now are those 5 foot, 6 foot T-bars are now, the tomato plants are getting too tall, and they're kind of leaning and tipping over that. So we still have yet to find a really we're having a good problem.
Yeah, see, now we're serious about tomato growing in this part of the country. Mm-hmm. So some of these feats of engineering are well worth it to get our tomato crop.
It is amazing. And I will say last week on the garden tour, there was a place by you. There were 2 houses right next door, and it was great to see, especially neighbors who could work together on that, and they really appreciated each other. But then there was a third neighbor who wasn't on the tour, but the backyards led into his backyard. There was no fence there, and they encouraged you to go back and look at his vegetable garden. And what he had he didn't do cages at all. He had grids, metal grids that you would see maybe in a store, so kind of like displays, things that would hold up like T-shirts or something like that. But these metal grids, rods, metal, kind of all bit of a 6 foot by probably 3 foot grids. And he had those set in a kind of a V so that the tomato plant came up in the middle. And then he had this along the side at a fairly steep angle so that the tomatoes kind of pushed against that, but didn't flop over too much. It is the feat of engineering about how people figure out the way to do this. How they stake them, if they stake them at all. I'm curious I would love to go back and look at your vegetable garden again and see how that's coming. And we have a smaller space, so we've got to grow up. We can't grow out too much.
It's interesting because I've over the years I've heard some people use rebar. They've created almost a welded cage with a heavy rebar. It comes to mind that a number of years ago I thought, well, for some of the cherry tomatoes, especially that really ramble and grow, maybe should put a cage. So I got some of these kind of what I'd call maybe a wimpy cage, kind of a wimpy tomato cage with light metal and wire. And the tomato became so massive in that at the end of the season, I couldn't get the tomato separated from that cage. And I just threw out the whole works and chalked that experience. So it's interesting. So for anybody that's listening, if you have a method for that is your favorite method for holding up and supporting your tomato plants, Thanks. Yeah, give me an email, donald.kinsler@ndsu.edu. I'd love to hear about it. We could share it on the air.
That would be great. Well, let's take a quick little break and we're going to talk more about our vegetable gardens. We'll have some tips, things to work on, things to look out for, and how to make sure you have a better crop this year.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
All right, we're back and we're talking about our vegetable gardens this week, and we're talking about what we've noticed in our gardens, and it's been a great year. It's been a great growing year, and we've been talking about tomatoes, but let's talk a little bit about how to. We've talked in the past about how to fertilize, but the other process of maintenance is keeping bugs away, and also let's talk about tomato blight. Though some people may be seeing that now. How do you deal with tomato blight, or how do you prevent it?
The tomato blight. Of course, there's a couple of things when we talk about blight. There are foliage blights. The foliage blights tend on tomatoes to cause the lower leaves to become yellow, some brownish, blackish spots on. And many tomato growers will remove the bottom leaves, which you can easily do, so that before they become infected, or if they start turning a little yellow, just remove those lower leaves. And that will prevent the soil and water and the microorganisms from the soil from splashing up to the lower leaves, because once they get a hold on the lower leaves, they can just continue on up. So removing the lower leaves is an option many do. A person could use preventative fungicides, all-purpose flower and vegetable fungicides as preventatives. And preventative is a key word. Once the lower leaves on a tomato become blighted, yellow, they're not going to revert to good green no matter what you do. So fungicides, if you opt to use those, are preventative. And so that's one option. Watering only the soil and not the leaves helps prevent. Of course, we can't do much about Mother Nature. When she gives us moisture, she's getting the leaves wet. But even in nature, you see these blights too. So another thing that many will do, that's one advocacy for caging or staking your tomato. It gets them up off the ground.
Well, so so you were just talking about that you don't stake or cage. How do you deal with that? Because I'm sure your tomatoes are flopping over, the leaves are getting on the ground.
Many leaves are getting on the ground. I do treat them with a fungicide.
Okay.
Yep. The tomatoes and potatoes, I do apply a fungicide.
Okay.
Because potatoes are very susceptible to blights. I think that's what caused the great Irish potato famine, were blights. And so I do treat the tomatoes and potatoes with a preventative fungicide, and that helps greatly. And then when I am watering, I water only the soil. I don't use an overhead sprinkler on the tomatoes. But again, caging, staking does get them up off the ground, better air circulation, and less chance of blights.
All right. So let's talk about what about bugs and things like that. How are you keeping from all of your plants? How are you working on pest control?
Now, in field crops, farmers are continually monitoring and scouting their fields, scouting to see what's happening, scouting for any insects, diseases, so they can catch them right away. So I'm continually scouting the vegetable garden. A couple things I look for. If any of the Colorado potato beetles start appearing, this year they're not, knock on wood. Last year I had to apply a spinosad, which is a good organic type insecticide that has great effect on Colorado potato beetle. And I have not seen any Colorado potato beetles. They can devastate a potato crop. And so I'm continually scouting. One thing I did see, I saw the cabbage butterflies, the white, occasionally yellow butterflies flitting around the cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli. And those butterflies lay eggs, which very soon hatch into a green larvae called the cabbage looper. And it's those annoying larvae, the caterpillars, that when you go to harvest your broccoli, those worms are nestled in amongst the kind of the spaces between the broccoli head, and very unappetizing. They tend to lurk in there, and sometimes you don't find them until you've steamed the broccoli or cooked it or gone to cut it apart. And so anyway, I don't like that. And also on cabbage, I don't want all that mess down in between the leaves and et cetera, and worms lurking. So as soon as I see the cabbage butterflies flitting around, I apply an insecticide. One that I like is the insecticide 8, EIGHT. It has cabbage loopers and a number of other garden insects on it. I carefully observe the harvest interval. That is the safe time between the time you apply the product and the time that you harvest it. So I always watch that for safety. 7, SEVIN, good all-purpose insecticide. There are products. An interesting one for the cabbage looper is one called BT, B as in boy, T as in Tom. That stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a beneficial bacteria that if you catch the cabbage loopers when they're tiny, this beneficial bacteria will kill the cabbage loopers. It doesn't harm humans or pets, but it will kill those but it has to be applied when those little cabbage loopers are tiny. Garden centers sell it, BT.
How about for things like the potato beetle you were talking about earlier? Because we're growing potatoes this year for the first time. Should we apply something like that before we even see the bug, or do you have to wait until you see the bug to apply the insecticide?
It's best to, and that's all about scouting. It's best to wait at to see the very earliest. Now, one thing that I've noticed on potato beetle, for example, is if you do the scouting early, you can find egg masses under the potato leaves. They're very visible collections of orange eggs on the underside. And one thing that people used to do before insecticides were available, they would just pick off any leaves that had egg masses under, and for every egg that you're removing, there's one less potato beetle. Okay. And so I have done that in the past. This year I didn't see any egg masses and don't have any potato beetles. People used to pick off the big beetles. They don't run very fast, so you can just, flip them into a can of, they used to use kerosene or gasoline, soapy water works as well. I should mention, as long as, I talked about spinosad, which is an organic product for many insect controls, as well as Colorado potato beetle. I should also mention a few other organic type options. One is insecticidal soap. Another is neem oil. Many people choose those as an option. One thing that is important on those, they are contact insecticides, meaning that those products have to coat the insect's body. And that's the means of control and kill on those. Other synthetic insecticides like the 7 and 8, they produce a residual on the leaf. And then as the insect eats that leaf, then they die. And so they have a longer residual. Neem oil, insecticidal soap don't have a residual. They kind of have to kill that insect when they contact it. And so typically you'd need to reapply more often. But again, with any of the synthetic insecticides, very important to read the label, follow all safety precautions so that those materials are broken down before we harvest them.
Radishes always seem to be kind of
they are.
They seem to be like one of the first things that bugs will go after.
Leaves. The leaves get just shot hole.
Yeah.
And that is the flea beetle.
Okay.
And if you look closely, sometimes you don't always see what's causing these little shot holes. But if you look closely, you find a little kind of black fly, little flea type thing. It's actually a beetle, maybe about the size of a pinhead or so. And they can really affect the leaves, and that affects the photosynthesis and the development. And also, radishes will tend to get little kind of maggots and different things that cause brown streaking in the flesh of the radish. So again, a person can use neem oil, insecticidal soap, or 7, 8. I always say I'm waiting for 9 to be developed because that's going to be really good, or the spinosad. So a number of different products and choices.
Do you ever use, I've heard a lot about pest deterring flowers or releasing a bunch of ladybugs into the garden. Have you ever used those kinds of methods?
It's interesting. Pest deterrent plants, such as the classic is marigolds. And the jury is still out on those. And if it's working for some people, I always suggest keep on doing it, keep on planting it. In our own one, I've tested that. It hasn't worked to deter, but maybe it has to be a certain ratio of marigolds or other pest deterrent plants, a certain ratio of enough of those next to the crop. In our own garden, I maybe can't expect a row of marigolds on the outside to protect something that's way on the inside. And so, it's interesting. There's maybe not hard and fast research on some of that, but that doesn't mean they don't work. So I always encourage people to keep doing what you're doing on some of those.
We did ladybugs last year, and I think that they worked okay.
Yeah, how did that work for you,
I think they
John?
worked okay. We had some things that just didn't, that I think we may have gotten in there a little late. What do you hear about ladybugs?
And of course, the Asian lady beetle, do I have that term right? The Asian lady beetle, that is the one, it's a ladybug lookalike, and that is the one that they release into soybean fields in our area to attack the soybean aphid.
Okay.
So those are used routinely in the big fields of soybeans in the area. So it's interesting. In the late summer or early fall, when the soybean crops are harvested, that's the little ladybug lookalike that invades our homes. Have you had those in your home, John?
Yeah.
And so they're looking for a place to go after the soybeans are harvested. But they have been shown to attack that soybean aphid. And so there are, that's a good case in point of where those beneficial insects can help reduce the insects that attack crops, including our vegetables.
Are there any other vegetables or fruits, for that matter, that are really susceptible to bugs in our areas, to insects, and what's the best way to treat those?
Oh, squash vine borer. Squash vine borer is an interesting insect. It's a beetle that lays its eggs at the base of squash vines. The eggs hatch into a larvae that works internally in the squash vines, the stems, and it causes collapse. It kind of eats it eats the inside of the squash stems, and then it just can't get water and nutrients up, and then the whole thing just all of a sudden collapses. It looks like it's wilting on a hot day, and many of us who have experienced that, you water the squash, might recover a little, but eventually it just wilts, and so it can be terminal. That's the squash vine borer. You treat that by applying, and it really should be done earlier in the season, kind of as the squash vines are elongating, but you treat the lower 18 inches from where the squash is emerging from the ground and on up about 18 inches. That's where that insect is laying its eggs. And so that can be quite interesting. So if anyone is experiencing collapse, then we set our schedule for next year already that as that squash is elongating, I need to get an insecticide, spinosad, 7-8, something applied. Some people have even wrapped those lower stems with aluminum foil to keep that insect from laying its eggs on there. Some people that really have an attention to detail can spot those little eggs on the stem and then just whisk them off of the stem. But that takes a very sharp eye to see these little tiny eggs on the squash stem. Let's see, other cucumber beetles, little striped cucumber beetles that can carry a cucumber wilt that affects cucumbers and melons. We need to be on the lookout for that. There's a bean leaf beetle. So it's interesting. Each of these types of things has their specific things. Potato beetles, cucumber beetles, a bean leaf beetle, flea beetles on radishes.
How is there anything that likes to eat kale?
Well, no, me included. I need to learn to eat kale. I didn't grow up with
I think
kale.
you've got plenty of other things to eat in your garden.
I need to learn to eat kale.
It's a beneficial vegetable, I believe,
yes.
but it's not one that I've developed a taste for.
But
How about you?
I've baked kale chips.
Okay.
I like kale in. There's a soup at Olive Garden that has kale in it. That's nice.
Where you can't taste it.
Yeah,
and it gets soft.
But even
enough,
the baked kale, I covered it with salt. It was meant to be a salty chip. So I don't.
Work?
It was okay. I've done it once.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting. Kale is in that cabbage family, and I like other members of the cabbage family. And so now, Casey, you've enjoyed vegetable gardening too. Both, I think we've discussed, you've gardened in pots and planters and things, as well as in-ground gardens. Is there a favorite vegetable that you've encountered? What are some of your favorites?
Yes, I really love potatoes for one. I think they're so versatile and they're so easy, at least from what I've experienced, to grow. Though I did the mounding thing wrong the first time. I didn't realize that you mounded it as it grew. We mounded it when we planted, but it still worked.
Potatoes?
Sure. And it still turned out fine. Sugar snap peas. Carrots. They're so nice and sweet and sugary, way better than anything I bought. And I used them in a shepherd's pie, and it was the best shepherd's pie I've ever had.
Awesome. I'm glad you mentioned the hilling up of potatoes, because that's, of course, what the commercial potato growers do at a certain point when you can still get between the rows with equipment. They have equipment that goes along and mounds up the soil around the base of the plants. So, you hill them up, you plant them at the appropriate depth, the seed pieces, but then as they grow and when the plant gets to a certain point, you mound soil up over them. They produce tubers better, and also, very importantly, it prevents them from getting a sunburn, sun scald. They'll turn green because many of the tubers will form fairly close to the soil surface. And if you haven't hilled them up, mounded them up, then you lose a certain percentage of them because you should not eat the green potatoes. And so even if you didn't get that earlier, if you can still mound some soil up over that, because as the potato vines start to go down a little bit, as the fall starts to approach, the vines are going to become less and start getting ready for harvest. And that's the time at which a lot of those shallow tubers will start to get their greening on that. So it's never really too late to cover them with some soil to preserve that.
We're doing potatoes for the first time we're doing them in buckets.
Oh, that's going to be fun to hear about.
Yeah, and so we did.
How do the plants look?
They look great. They look great, but like with potatoes, because they're buried. So we're very curious to see how this will go. But yeah, we kind of kept adding dirt kind of as it got, and then it just really shot up so much that we couldn't cover it. So we'll add a little bit more dirt, but yeah, it'll be fun to see.
You'll have a fun treasure hunt.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it'll be the
that's true.
emergence of them.
Growing potatoes, that is treasure hunt. I oftentimes say that digging them in the fall, it's like digging for treasure, because it's so fun to lift that up and find what size tubers you've got under them. Now, of course, no discussion of gardening would be complete without weeds.
No.
So, Casey, in some of the gardening that you have done, do you have a favorite weed control method?
This is going to sound silly because most people hate picking weeds. I find it very relaxing to just listen to some music.
I do as well.
Pick out the thistles, or I actually had some dill, though most people would not consider that a weed maybe. Our dill just went everywhere. And
sure,
so having
and if
to pick
it's
out
growing
a dill,
where you don't want it.
Exactly. I could constitute as a weed.
The definition of a weed.
But I like picking them. I've used some chemicals to take care of them before, but this year I'm trying to just manage them manually with picking and seeing how I do. And in the future, I'll decide further, if I want to keep using chemicals.
Sure. And John, how do you keep weeds in your vegetable?
And then that's the thing in the vegetable garden. Like I said earlier, because we have this snow fence around it to keep as we're putting in this other fence to keep various critters out, including our dogs. So you have to kind of lean over, or you have to take apart part of the fence. It's not as easy the accessibility is not a great issue, but hopefully now this weekend I can finish the fence up, then we'll have better access to it. But yeah, I remember probably about a month ago, we started seeing all the maple seedlings just popping up everywhere. And so, that just really kind of took a little bit of effort to get on top of that. And since then, really seeding, or it's not seeding, but weeding hasn't been as much. It hasn't just been needed as much. It's been much easier to stay on top of. I think people will say, if you get out there early and you do it early, and you stay on top of it, it's not as much of a chore. And following your advice from a couple of years ago, we mulch around our tomato plants, so that suppresses weeds in those areas. So yeah, it's not as bad. It's not as bad. There's other parts of the yard where I need to weed more in the flower areas, but we can get to those.
Yeah, I have a vine that's been coming through and just spreading. And of course, this type of vine has a central root, and then it just spreads and branches out and comes through wherever. And as soon as those leaves can photosynthesize, it just bursts. And so trying to keep on top of that.
Yeah. In case you bring up a good point too, sometimes weed control, whether it's in the vegetable garden or anywhere, it kind of depends on identifying whether that weed is an annual or a perennial. Of course, annual weeds, you don't want to let them go to seed. But the bright spot of an annual weed is that when the frost comes, it's going to die. And whereas perennial weeds, the winter hardy type, are going to come back from that root system. And so identifying kind of what type is a key. And in our own garden, between the rows, I have the vegetables kind of laid out in rows. And so one of my favorite weed controls is a push-type cultivator. It's got wooden handles, that you walk along behind to push on the wooden handles. And the weed control mechanism is a flat bar that cuts right below the soil surface, maybe about an inch or so below soil surface. Then it's got a couple of cultivator teeth behind that. So you're pushing it along. It's got a wheel in front, so it pushes fairly easy. And you just push along, and it is undercutting the little weeds. So it's important to get them when the weeds are maybe an inch or so or less. And it does a very efficient job of doing in between the rows. So I like that. And then, of course, weeding in the row itself, there isn't much of a substitute for just hand pulling. I got a little hand weeder. I got rid of my butcher knife and kitchen knife and went for something that it was actually designed to weed in the row, a kind of a little short-handled weeder, a sickle-type weeder. And so I carefully go through. Purslane is a big problem. Yeah. I know you can eat it, but a little purslane goes a long way. Yeah. Our vegetable garden was a carpet of Siberian elm seedlings when they dropped this year. Heavy seed crop is just a carpet. But the cultivator in between took care of them. But now within the rows, I had to go through and kind of hand weed. I used my kneeler to go along, scoot myself along. And, there is not a good way to get weeds out of a row of vegetables or next to a vegetable without actually just pulling them, carefully trying to keep the vegetable from getting disturbed. And of course, that's key too in getting these weeds when they're little. If a weed is big and it's right beside the vegetable plant, you can pull out the vegetable plant just as you're pulling up the weed. So getting them when they're young. But Casey, I agree with you. I've sometimes termed weeding that is as addictive as eating popcorn. Not everyone has shared that thought, but when you kind of see the good clean row as you're getting out all the purslane and other things, I joke about purslane. I know it's edible. I've had it with ranch dressing. It's amazing. Makes a good salad. But man, one purslane plant, it's an annual, but one purslane plant has been found to produce 100,000 seeds that can shoot the seeds when the seed pods burst. They can shoot them at least 25 feet, and the seed can last in the soil for 40 years. So one purslane plant that escapes, goes to seed, and shoots all over your garden, that can keep you busy for the next 40 years. And so I try in my garden, I try not to have purslane. I know some people enjoy their purslane. Personally, I don't.
In our yard is fenced off because of our dogs. And here's another reason to stay on top of your weeding. On the other side of the fence, our dogs have been very interested in something on the other side of the fence. And the other day I saw what it was. There was a rabbit's nest had been right at the base of the other side of the fence, and which is where we have our rhubarb. So it's a nice shady area, and we've let it go to, there's been a number of weeds out there. So I had to remove my dogs from that area, and then I had to go over and some gardeners would have taken a more severe approach, but I relocated those baby rabbits. Just couldn't do it, but I relocated them to an area, and then
they are so cute.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's also the screaming. They cry, and it's hard to.
I've always said rabbit control would be much easier if they were ugly.
Yeah.
But they are so cute.
In our neighborhood, we have and they're actually in a tree in our yard. We have, I think it's a family of 5 Cooper's hawks.
Oh.
So I think that they will, I'm just trusting nature to take care of this issue. But so that's another good thing to weed. Another good reason to weed is because then you eliminate that cover for critters and things that you don't want in your yard. So I went out in that back area, and one of those old, long handle, 3-pronged, kind of, what is that? Weeder, I guess. I was able to go through and really pull up a lot of stuff. Couldn't do a fine job to get in there, but it was really satisfying to do that, to really pull up a fair amount. You could pull it up, and then I put it in a bucket and threw it away. But yeah, weeding is something. It can be a chore. It can be a wonderful exercise and a mind clearing release. And it can also just be like a nice physical activity to do. And the good thing about that is that you see what you've done, and you see that you've made a lot of progress. You feel really good about that, while things like your potatoes are still underground and you can't see them, the final product.
Yes, I've always done it, waited till like the evening where it's a little bit cooler. And then I kind of refer to it as like an evening with the weeds, and play some music and just relax a little bit. But that's one great thing about balcony
I like that,
gardening.
An evening with the weeds. Yes.
Yeah. One great thing about balcony gardening that I've experienced as I've done my balcony too is there's like no weeds, no pests that I have to worry about. And if there was something to get in there, well, I'll just clean out the pot for next year and I don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
And I've noticed too in our own garden now, let's see, that garden spot is probably 8 years old now. And I've noticed that the weed pressure is becoming less. And because the longer you garden, I know my parents gardened in their spot in Lisbon for probably 60 years. And towards the end of that, gosh, does it take 60 years to become less weed? But no, I was going to say for a number of those years, as time went on, very little weed pressure in those areas. And I'm noticing less weed pressure in our own garden. See, if you can prevent those annual weeds from going to seed, then the pressure becomes less. And so you can actually become less and less dependent on the weed control. But of course, thistles, I think I'm going to battle thistles for the rest of my life.
So. Oh, yeah.
And, so those you do the best you can. But if you let them proliferate, if you don't keep on it, even if you don't win and have a place that's thistle free, even if you don't win, you keep them in check.
Yeah.
You keep them from becoming a total yard full of Canadian thistles.
All right, let's take another quick break. When we come back, let's talk about harvesting and maybe if there's some things that we can get a second crop in.
Good. So I suppose we can do fairly short on that.
Yeah.
Are we? Yeah.
10:55.
Okay.
You ready?
Ready.
Okay. All right, we're back and we're talking about our vegetable gardens, and let's talk about harvesting. You know, I know it's time to harvest the tomatoes when the squirrels start getting the tomatoes right before I do.
Do you have a ripe tomato yet?
We've had a couple of the smallest sun sugars. They've started. I picked them because I don't want the squirrels to get them, and I just brought them inside and put them on a windowsill, and so haven't harvested any ripe tomatoes.
How about you, Casey, in the garden?
Actually, yeah, I've had three.
Good.
Yes, three it's a very meaty variety of tomato.
Oh, nice.
My husband knows the names of the varieties better than I do. I just think they're pretty and cool and tasty.
Excellent.
It would be great on a sandwich, but it's been great.
Well, you guys are ahead of me. I don't have any ripe ones yet. Lots of nice green ones coming along. The varieties I planted were Celebrity and Big Beef, which are two of my favorites. I planted the garden around Memorial Day this year, and so I wasn't the earliest gardener. So I'm looking forward to it. You guys are ahead of me. Broccoli, we were enjoying broccoli, and of course radishes, lettuce, things like that.
Yeah, we've had spinach.
Ah, awesome.
How do you know like when to harvest something, like let's say tomatoes? Like, so you wait until that they're in color. Is it the color? Is that the giveaway, or do you look for a feel?
If of course the best, most flavorful tomato is going to be one that is fully ripened on the vine.
Okay.
And so good red color, full red, not just pinkish, but full red color. And when a little bit of pressure with the fingers, they're softened a bit, and rather than hard. And so I like to leave ours on. If you left it on too long, then of course the skin starts to get kind of wrinkly, and then you've left or mushy.
Right.
But I like to leave them on kind of right up until the bitter end of. And everyone differs a little bit. Some people like a tomato that's maybe a little firm. Others like to leave it on a little bit longer, a few more days longer, so that they get the full flavor, even if the tomato flesh becomes a little softer. So sometimes it's a little personal preference as to whether you like the tomato ripe but a little firm, or whether leave it a few days, let it get even a little riper, but maybe the flesh is going to be a little less firm. So some of it's personal preference. But for that full flavor, they shouldn't really be picked before they're at that full red. If you were, those that ship tomatoes and things have to kind of pick them when they're in the kind of pinkish or orange stage instead of fully ripe. Tomatoes will ripen off the vine, but they don't always develop that full flavor. The stem and everything is still pumping good stuff into that fruit if they're kept on the vine.
How about things like peppers? Do you just for things like peppers, do you just will you visibly see, like, once they seem like that's what a jalapeno looks like, that's when I pick it?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, exactly. And an interesting thing too is peppers. Of course, there's all different colors of peppers. A lot of the peppers that are red, eventually red, start out green and then turn to red, but they can be harvested any time that they look like a pepper. Okay. So even the red types, if you want to start using some while they're still green before they turn to red, that's fine. As the longer they stay on, if it's a hot type pepper, they probably gain more heat the longer they go. But yeah, as soon as it looks like a pepper, you can go ahead. And even like the bell type pepper, you can say it's the green bell type pepper. You can start using those when they're a little smaller, or let the size increase. Most of the bell peppers, if the green or red type, if you leave them on long enough, many of them will turn to red too, depending on the variety.
And then for things like, we were talking about potatoes earlier, potatoes, you want to wait until the vines, till the leaves kind of die off.
Until the vines are brown, brown and kind of crisp. Or you can start, what I like to do on the potatoes out in the garden is start borrowing a few potatoes. You leave the vine intact, but then just by hand, you scrape down a little of the soil and see if you can find a potato tuber that's big enough, and then you can take that off without disturbing the rest of the plant. So we will sometimes start, that sounds good for supper tonight. I might go visit the potato patch and see if I can dig down on a few plants and find some tubers that are big enough to eat yet.
And carrots, you can leave in Until
Yeah.
frost, really,
Yeah,
right?
you can, as soon as they're big enough to kind of something to sample, you can just pull those off, brush aside a little soil and nibble. Gosh, that's good eating right out in the garden, or leave those in. The sugars do accumulate as the temperatures get cooler too.
How about those things that are well, like some of the first things we planted, like radishes? Again, underground, you can't necessarily tell when they're ready. How do you know when a radish is ready?
Yeah, the radish, I kind of look at the base of the plant, and sometimes you even have to feel a little, or you can see the bulb that's the radish, the root type, the enlarged root. And so they can be used at whatever size would make a radish for you. But if left in the ground too long, they'll oftentimes split open.
Okay.
And become a little woody, stringy, fibrous, not a nice crisp radish. And, it's interesting. We talk about, classic pulling carrot out of the garden and brushing off the dirt and sampling. That is such a classic, good, fresh out of the garden eating. Yeah, it brought to mind, my grandmother Kinsler always said, that is wonderful, because there was an old saying, everyone has to eat a peck of dirt before you die. And a peck is, I think, a third of a bushel.
Okay.
So if everyone has to eat a peck of dirt before you die, you may as well enjoy it out in the garden on a carrot or two.
That's right.
How about
over your lifetime.
the things that we planned earlier, we were just talking about radishes, but lettuce, things like that. Can we still get in a second session?
Yes. In fact,
seeding?
many of us have had problems with radishes that are spring planted. Now, radishes can be planted early in April or so, but if you plant them kind of in the normal gardening time in May, radishes come up, and oftentimes we'll start getting some warm weather. And radishes don't like warm weather, so they'll oftentimes grow up into more tops and less of the radish enlarged root. And also they can become more fibrous. The flavor sometimes is maybe hotter than we would like. And so the quality oftentimes isn't the way we would like it when we plant a spring crop. But many people that love radishes have learned that the crop planted in August, early August, to mid-August. The days are starting to get shorter. We'll start getting cooler weather. And so radishes that they'll come up quickly because the soil's nice and warm, but they'll start to develop and enlarge as the temperatures are getting a little cooler. And so some of the best quality radishes that anyone has had are those that are planted actually in August. And lettuce, many of our lettuce crops right now are bolting. That means they kind of go to seed and get bitter. But you can plant a crop of lettuce looking over the next couple of weeks or so. Yeah, I'd wait until the heat of July is done, but sometime between August 1st, August 15th.
Okay.
So radishes, lettuce, spinach, kale can all be planted. Beets probably can be planted at that time. I'll let you in a little secret. Rabbits got into our garden and ate the string beans, the peas, and all that. Ooh. So we did not get a normal crop. So about 5 days ago, my wife Mary and I planted a second crop of some of those. I don't know if they're going to make it or not, but we didn't have much to lose. So we just planted our crop of string beans, second crop, and peas. And we even tried sweet corn to replant from what the rabbits had gotten into the fence and ruined. So anyway, in addition to the things that you should be planting in August, we're doing some of the things that we needed to replant.
I ought to try that. I tried transplanting my sugar snap peas this year, and they did not transplant very well, and my string beans did not come up this year. So maybe I just gotta give it another chance.
It's interesting. Some vegetables, transplanting is the way to go. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. Other things just don't seem to transplant well. And yeah, the peas and beans, that's experience is always the best teacher.
Casey, what's the thing that you're most looking forward to making with all the vegetables in your garden?
My husband's really excited for me to make salsa marinara sauce, a lot of the tomato-based stuff. I'm really excited. I've mentioned this a little bit, but again, potatoes are so versatile. I love making fresh French fries, and with the fruits that come in, making pies, or just adding a little bit of veggies, hiding it into some of our dinners so we can get our vegetables that we need.
Don, what about you? What are you looking forward to eating?
Probably potatoes. We grow a lot of potatoes and enjoy them all winter long. Onions. The onion crop is looking really good. We use a lot of onions. We plant some varieties that store all winter long. And melons. I love growing watermelon and muskmelon. So I'm looking forward to that. How about you, John?
We'll make it a hat trick. Potatoes. I think because this is our first time, but then we've heard so much about. We watch various cooking shows. German butterball potatoes.
Oh, I've heard of those.
And so we found a seed for it, or we found the potato seedling, and so we tried that. So we've never even tried them. Very much looking forward to trying that. But then also carrots, because I love them. I kind of like the sweeter vegetables, things that I can roast. And I'm really looking forward to those fall days. When you said shepherd's pie, I just started thinking like, oh, this will be good.
Have you made any resolutions for next year based on how things are doing this year? Anything you're going to change for next year?
We may actually just change the layout, but while we're putting in this fence, it'll be kind of permanent space. But with the raised beds, we can kind of move those around. So seeing kind of how things are growing, how we could kind of maximize the area. But yeah, I'm really happy with how things are going. Again, we will probably be able to be on top of getting the tomato plants caged and getting those so that they're not flopping over. Just looking forward to, with years of experience, having a better control over it for next year. So no real resolutions. I'm trying to think. I would like to have the space to try onions, but that's something too that I feel.
Onions are worth it.
Okay.
Give it a shot.
Because we use them a lot. It's just it's a space issue, and I'm fine buying onions too. But yeah, I would love to try. Looks like there's some really good kind of like almost like candy like onions. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
awesome. And I'm going to keep the rabbits out of our fenced garden because we have our garden fenced, but I need to put chicken wire type things better in place down around the base of that fence because the rabbits got in, and that's why I had to replant.
Got to bury them a little bit.
You got it, because the rabbits, if they're after fresh string bean plants, they're gonna do what they need to do to get it to them.
Yeah,
So that's my resolution for next year.
I'm gonna avoid transplanting those hardy species, as well as I have a lot of tomatoes in small pots on my balcony, and they are too small, so I need to get bigger pots.
Go big.
Good idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Don, if people have questions for you, or if they want to brag about their big successes, we'd love to hear that. Or if they have, like we were saying earlier, ingenious ways in which they have caged or trellised their tomatoes or other plants, we'd love to hear about this. What's the best way to reach you?
Email me, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu.
And send a picture if you can. We'd love to see these. This would be great.
Especially if you send your tomato engineering feed. Send a picture of that. I'd love to see it.
Casey, it was great to meet you, and thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. Thank you, and thank you everyone for listening.